Hello to everyone starting to join the webinar here. We'll get started in a few minutes. All right, let's get started here. Welcome everyone to the Careers and Conversations panel series hosted by the Microbiome Centers Consortium Education Working Group. Hope everyone's having a great spring break so far or is going to have one soon. My name's Derek Camp. I'll be moderating the discussion today. I'm joined working tech with Kim Dovu and Katrina DeWitt. We're working with a new format here on this panel, working on webinars, and this conversation will be recorded and posted online later on our YouTube channel. So the MCC is a nationwide network of microbiome centers working together to develop and share tools and resources that accelerate the understanding of all microbiomes. Part of this mission includes preparing early career scientists who are pursuing careers in microbiome research. Then with these panel discussions, we hope to have the space where folks are able, who are more established in their careers, can offer insights, knowledge, and encouragement to those of us beginning to carve our paths in microbiome science. Our panel today is titled Communicating Science for Impact. It's going to focus on science communication, both in a public and professional setting. Our panelists represent a diverse set of careers ranging from industry professionals to public health communicators, and we're really grateful for their time and willingness to share their experiences and thoughts on what brought them into these fields that they're in right now and what insights they've made along the way. So with that, we'll start with our panelist introductions. I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And in that, then, if you could give your name, the institution that you're at the moment, your position title, and maybe a brief description of that role, and then a quick overview of your career path or what brought you into the position that you have today. And if you have any slides that you'd like to share, we're happy to see those as well. Let's start with Mackenzie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mackenzie, and I am associated with the Association for Public Health Laboratories. I'm currently a fellow with the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and within my role, I'm working in biosafety. I took this role because I'm looking to transition from working in the lab to being a science communicator. So I recently have taken a new position with the Alzheimer's Association as a science engagement specialist. So my role mainly focuses currently on keeping those in the lab safe around biosafety, lots of document writing, creating trainings, and sort of communicating with lab folks how to stay safe while they're on the job.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew. I'm currently at 10x Genomics as a product marketing manager. What this means is that I'm really lead on bringing a products and one of our product lines to market. I'm kind of the translator between our research and development team and our product management team to our broader commercial team and to our customers. So really clarifying, can a product be commercialized? Is this something that the market is asking for? Who needs this product? And who do we sell to? And what should we emphasize when talking to customers? Um, Anything else? Derek, am I leaving anything else out?
Do you want to briefly talk about how you got this job?
Sure, I'd love to. I started at Beckman Coulter Life Sciences in 2021 as a copywriter and a sales trainer. And then I moved to more into marketing communications at Danaher Corporation in 2023. I'm now at 10X and I started in 2020.
Cool. Thanks so much, Matt. And then, Mineka, can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Menaka Wilhelm. I have a couple slides, so I can throw those up just so we have something to look at too. Um, I am a communicator at the Joint Genome Institute at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, so in the Bay Area. And the JGI is a user facility, so we provide capabilities to researchers around the world who work in plants, microbes, algae, fungi, all kinds of organisms that are relevant to the Department of Energy's mission. And so researchers write proposals, send in samples, and work with our facility to advance their work. I cover what our users are doing and what our staff researchers are up to. And I do that in a wide variety of ways. I make a podcast for the JGI called Genome Insider. I also make videos for the JGI. I write articles for our website. I work on infographics. I think that's most of it, like slide decks, basically whatever's going around on around the JGI. And I work on a team of two communicators and one director, so it's not just me. And I sort of came from research into this job via the American Association for the Advancement of Science's Mass Media Fellowship. And then made my way kind of into science journalism for a few years and worked in audio production, mainly for this kids science podcast called Brains On, before I got this job. And so now at the JGI, I've sort of come a little bit full circle where I'm covering basic science, but in a wide variety of ways, and for several different audiences. So that's my background. And it's great to be here. It's cool to hear what everyone else is doing in communication here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mineka. And then finally, Tess.
Thank you. So my name is Tess Konovich. I got my master's at Rutgers in 2022, and then I was hired on at Earthshift Global, which is a sustainability consulting firm. So companies come to us with their products or processes, and my team of analysts help them be better for the planet. And so they originally hired me as a data visualization specialist. So my career started in reports, taking bar charts, making them more fun, digestible. We do life cycle assessment, so that's looking at the entire life cycle of that product or process. So it was back to back to back pages of charts. So that's where I started. And then in the last 2 years, I've moved into marketing as well. So now I'll do editorial reviews, but then also market our services and things like that. So really, my team is smaller, and anytime something needs to sparkle a little bit, they send it to my desk, is how we kind of say it. So like Monica said, the infographics, videos, trainings, yeah, anytime a deliverable needs to look nice and understandable and digestible, it comes across my desk because it's some pretty hefty science. So that's what I do. How I got there, again, I said I went to Rutgers, so I got my master's and I studied in Katrina's lab actually the effects of human-driven change across organisms, ecosystems. So my background is ecology-based, some environmental science there as well. Not communications, but now that's what I'm doing. So I really enjoy it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, and for joining us here. It's going to be a good conversation. We have such a diversity of these perspectives that are coming in here, and I'm looking forward to it. So we're going to start this moderator-led discussion portion. And these questions are based on ones that attendees have filled out before they came here today. And we hope to generate discussion with and between our panelists. For each question, I'll prompt a specific panelist maybe to start us off, but I encourage others to jump in with maybe your own answers when the time is right, riff off each other's responses, or ask your own follow-up questions if you'd like to. For folks in the audience, if there's anything that the panelists bring up that you would like to learn more about, you can drop it in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to address that either during the conversation or at the time dedicated at the end for audience questions. So to start off, it's like communication is very important, as we know, but it all depends on a communicator, but also then the audience. So we have kind of like a two-part question here for folks. Can you tell people who is your core audience? Is it the public or maybe other industry professionals? And then how has that shaped the type of communication and tools that you're using? Like, is the language going to be very specific, or is it going to be broad maybe for folks to understand things? And are there any specific mediums that you might be using, whether it be visuals or we heard about some podcasting and stuff? Tess, who likes to make things sparkle, would you be able to kick that off for us?
Sure thing. And I think I don't want to speak on everyone's, but I have a number of target audiences. So the public is sometimes what I'm facing, the C-suite, which is, executives, I often am facing, other analysts, so technical audiences. So that's something I always start with. Who is your audience? Because things look very different. And even the processes in which we're doing them with. So if I'm working with someone more technical, I can use jargon. I can use words that the public doesn't maybe know about. I can also maybe develop some code, go into R, Python, develop visuals that way if we're working on a report together. But typically, and which is not as common, and if anyone else who visualizes, I don't know if you want to weigh in here, I use Microsoft Office a lot. So because that's what my audience uses. So I have the Excel, PowerPoint. I do a lot of graphic design in PowerPoint, which is a nightmare to most people, but those are the mediums I kind of use when it comes to public. I have this figure, I should have brought it, that it's like you have your analysts and then your public, and it's almost like the number of photos or images goes up as you get closer to the public and words go down. So we deliver anything from a 250-page report that's very technical to an infographic that's public facing. So I think audience is like the most important thing before you even start, in my opinion, to define.
That's great. I really love that idea of using the tools and language of your audience as a way to make that translation a whole lot more easier for folks to understand. I think a lot more people are going to know Excel maybe more than R or Python and all that such.
It started as a
Awesome.
bottleneck for me because originally I
Hmm.
wanted to use R, but not my whole team didn't use it. So then it was like if one thing needed to be changed, now I had it on my desk and then I became this bottleneck. So I found there's a ton of plugins I can put in the chat for PowerPoint, like Bright Slide, that turns it nearly into Adobe. That's an overstatement, but very similar where I can do a ton of work in PowerPoint. And then that way my team, if this needs to be read, the charts stay linked to Excel. So if their data changes, everything I've done change. There's a number of benefits. So could talk about this forever. I'll let someone else talk. But if anyone has questions about graphic design and PowerPoint, I feel like I'm an expert there.
Thanks so much. Mainika, it sounds like you're using a whole bunch of different tools for your communication. How has your audience shaped which tools that you're using?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for the JGI, we speak similarly to a really broad audience. But two big ones that stand out are basically researchers who aren't currently JGI users who we want to consider submitting proposals. And for those researchers, that spans like early career researchers. We accept proposals from PhD students on up to PIs. And we think about a lot of them spending a lot of time at the bench, which is why we're motivated to make a podcast about what's going on around the JGI, because you can listen to a podcast while you're pipetting, or driving into work or doing whatever. So that's part of what motivates the podcast medium for us. And I do work coming from audio production. I work in Pro Tools, which is a music production software. But a lot of people also work in Adobe Audition. And then also Descript is like really powerful for podcast production these days. The other big audience that we speak to is the Department of Energy. So it's basically a funder audience. And there our priorities aren't so much like, they don't so much shape the medium as what the message that we're sort of always trying to convey, which is what people's work could enable, that's in service of the DOE mission. So in that case, it's more message. And yeah, for a researcher audience, it's more medium.
That's great. Thank you. I know, Mackenzie, you were talking about trying to communicate safety, maybe both in a public health sense and also with the folks that you're talking to in your work. What are, I guess, when we are thinking about maybe metrics of success or how we perceive an impact when it comes to our audiences, either publicly or in the interpersonal folks that you're working with? Is there a way that you find or that you know that your communication is being impactful and helpful?
Yeah, so in my work here with the Ohio Department of Agriculture, because I'm in biosafety, a lot of that is going to be tracked using near misses or training retention, doing safety audits, that kind of thing will track if the um, communication that we're putting forth is actually beneficial or if it's just getting ignored and pushed aside. So a lot of that we'll have to either go in and have like meetings or have people report things and track the data that way. And then a lot of that can later be used, and we've had to rewrite various risk assessments or rewrite documents. So we'll have like SOPs or other types of documents that'll need to be rewritten to better shape the outcome.
I always love to hear about deliverables and how
Oh,
we
yeah.
track those. Always going to be an important part with whatever we're doing. Matt, you're working in an industry setting. I think often we can sometimes perceive science communication as simply only a public-facing enterprise where we're trying to just teach people about science, which is absolutely vital, but it takes these different forms too of maybe within a business setting. And coming from a science background to the business field, I wonder if you could speak to maybe some of the language that a business audience is going to be using and what they're going to be looking for, and how folks who want to get into that space might be able to leverage some of that.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. I would really like to emphasize the importance of being able to teach. And when I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to TA, as I'm sure many of us did, but also, lecture a few times, draw stuff out on the whiteboard for students, go through a lecture, light a PowerPoint deck, etc., as a part of the curriculum. And I really think that the skills that I learned doing that are almost directly translatable to a corporate environment. Now, like what Tess said, you really need to consider your audience. I really feel that you need to have a laser focus on your audience. For example, if we're doing a sales training, we like to say, imagine you're teaching this to a goldfish. No offense to any salespeople, but really hone down to what they need to know, the 3 bullet points, because they're really busy. If you're doing a memo to go out to a core team, you'll really need to think about what the most pressing thing that the core team needs to know and how to communicate it on one page, et cetera, et cetera. I think internal communications within a company really requires a focus on the audience and a focus on the what the message is in order to most effectively communicate there. I would also just like to emphasize, I think in corporate environments, it's really easy for things to kind of fall off the map and get left behind. So that kind of being able to repeat that communication, whether it's just doing it twice or three times or putting it through different media, whether it's a PowerPoint slide, a memo, a video I record in front of a whiteboard, et cetera, is really necessary to get that to sink in sometimes.
Yeah, I definitely know that the first time I've learned something, I also need it repeated a few times as well in a variety of formats. Maybe a podcast would be really helpful. That's great. Yeah. So this audience is going to be such an important part of and understanding that whether it's going to be in a professional setting or otherwise, or yeah, the public. But a lot of questions that we get in these settings too is just the nitty-gritty practical advice of how does one get this job? And so if folks would be able to speak to their experiences of finding the career path or paving where they're going right now. Were there any specific concrete examples that were helpful for you when you were trying to find this job, or something like a course, or maybe a volunteer opportunity or professional certificate? Were there any specific steps that you found helpful? Menaka, I know you've done some writing before. If you could speak to how someone who would want to do writing for their career as their scientific communication, how did you get your boots on the ground, foot in the door to get that working for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Basically, from the time that I was in graduate school, I took lots and lots of opportunities to sort of practice writing and then also producing audio when I could. And so, what that looked like for me was as I was transitioning out of my PhD program and wrapping up a master's, I was writing for like a student blog and also I took courses outside of my department, and I attended basically just any workshop I could get my hands on campus, but also a workshop called ComSciCon, which is national and available to graduate students. And between sort of all of those, just like where can I find opportunities to learn about writing and to practice writing, I did get together a portfolio of writing samples, and that's how I applied for the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship. And then those, because I think basically if you can take opportunities where you can to practice and generate samples, they'll snowball. Because then once I was at the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, I was placed at Wired for the summer. So that fellowship is meant to place graduate students in news outlets for a summer where they practice writing and interviewing for that outlet. So at Wired, I got to eavesdrop on reporters and write my own stories. And then I was sort of able to keep snowballing this body of work that then I used to apply for other internships and fellowships. And then I kept going. So I think wherever you can find opportunities, even if it's like, even if it seems small at the beginning, like a student blog, a group that or honestly, the communications team at your university or within your department is a great resource if you're interested in sort of just trying to generate writing samples. Um, yeah, I think just sort of getting a little bit scrappy is my main piece of advice. Yeah, I'm just looking for more ways to practice.
I love that snowballing idea. I hope that that's something that a lot of folks are able to experience. Of once you start getting a little bit going,
Yeah,
it's just going to compound.
the other thing that I would say about that is that for all of those like opportunities, I didn't really ever know where they were going to lead, which was hard
Hmm.
at the time. Like it was uncomfortable. And it's really like neat and clear now to have a job where I'm like, oh yeah, this led to this and this led to this and this led to this. But there were gaps in between where, yeah, I was like trying to wrap up my master's. I didn't know I would get the fellowship yet that placed me at Wired. I was finishing at Wired. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know I would get an internship next. So I think the other thing I would say is just keep at it.
Keep at it. What was that writing fellowship? AAAS writing fellowship? Was that
Yeah, it's called the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship. And they
Mass Media
accept
Fellowship?
applications. I think they even accept applications from undergrads now. I know this is a graduate student audience, but they accept applications once a year, basically. Yeah.
Awesome. So that's definitely worth a Google for anyone who's trying to get into this kind of field. Thanks so
Absolutely.
much. Yeah. Mackenzie, I know that you recently just got a new job position, and I'm wondering if you could speak to how you found that position. I know you're wanting to get into the science communication for a public-facing field. What's the process of just finding a job? I know that sometimes if you search science communication job, it doesn't exactly get the most specific results. So I'm wondering if you could speak to your experience there.
Yeah, so I was working to transition out of the lab for years, trying to figure it out. I was working at Emory for a bit, and I actually started my own wedding videography company as a way to sort of scratch that creative itch because I think that's why I just wasn't enjoying my time in the lab. I wasn't able to express myself and use all of those skills that I had. So I started my own wedding videography. And then after that, I was working at CDC and I was researching like other types of careers that can utilize science and get, you know, use out of the bachelor's and master's degree that I already had. And then I found a health communications specific master's program through Boston University. So I just completed that in October of this past year. So with that master's, now I have started to get excited about the prospects of a new job. So at the start of this year, I had started my own blog as well called Think Like a Scientist. So the premise was being able to create something, use my skills, and sort of showcase them in a way that I wouldn't get to do because I don't currently have a role that is public facing or you know, translate science for lay people. And so I wanted to gain experience doing that. So I just sort of made my own experience, which I think is really important if you are trying to transition careers or gain experience in a new way by being able to create your own thing, which is so easy to do because of social media and the technology we have today. It's really easy. I just use WordPress and I use Canva a lot to make all of my graphics as well as Adobe. And so with that Think Like a Scientist blog, I've been able to leverage more of my experience into transitioning to this new role, which I think was really important. I also have a portfolio on Canva. They have like a portfolio maker. I don't know if it's included in a free profile or not, but in there, I was able to make a portfolio, showcase some of my wedding videography stuff, all of the social media campaigns I've done in the past, a lot of stuff from my master's program, some examples of my work, and including like links in some of my blog posts as well. And I think that's what really set me apart. When I was applying to a lot of jobs, I was able to gain interviews because of a portfolio. So I would definitely recommend if you are wanting to do something that's more in the creative communications field is to have a portfolio which can showcase your work even if it's not you know real work. It can still show what you can do.
Mackenzie, interestingly, I do wedding photography. I think it's typical
Oh,
that master's students have side hustles.
oh yeah.
So I was thinking the same thing though. So I was doing photography and I ended up being really frustrated with my capacity to create visuals for my master's work. And so I taught myself Adobe. I now do graphic design for my company as well. But I think it's interesting that creative itch. And although this wasn't done intentionally, now I can share with the audience, and I hope you can do it intentionally, is by doing that every assignment I had in grad school, everything I had to do, whether it be like an invite for my aunt's bridal shower, like literally everything, I started making visuals using Adobe, teaching myself. And then I had them stored, not very organized, which I wish I had done. So now you can all do that and have your nice portfolio. But when you're going to apply for jobs, having that portfolio ready to go was really important, at least for my job. It was the first thing they asked for. And then, like Mackenzie said, her having that website is awesome. I have a website now where I've collected everything. I have my wedding photography there too. Because it makes you, it humanizes you and you're the whole package, all of that. But having that ready to go, I would say, is really important because you're going to start applying to jobs. You're going to get tired. having something like really professional and nice, whether it's the Canva portfolio or like Mackenzie said, WordPress, ready to go. The other thing I think that's important is if you can just start doing it now, you're writing samples, do it now because when it's 11 o'clock at night and your dream job pops up on LinkedIn, the last thing you're going to do is build a portfolio. So that's something I'm really happy I did really over the course of 3 years, probably. And so when Earthshift was hiring, I had a portfolio ready to go. It wasn't super relevant to what they were specifically doing, but they could see that I could write, I could design, I could do this. I was a professional. And then they ended up having an activity in the second round of interviews where then I could actually show a relevant project. But I would say most jobs are asking for portfolios, at least in the communications, design, that kind of space. So if you can just do it now, whether it's writing a blog like Mackenzie is or just whatever, it'll really set you up for success.
I forgot to mention I had some advice in terms of looking for jobs specifically. So a lot of times places aren't posting, especially for like your nonprofit and your smaller companies on LinkedIn because they have to pay to post jobs. So a lot of people will just post links within LinkedIn. So if you go into like the search bar and you type in maybe a field you're interested in or just a few like keywords, you'll see posts that people have posted, and then you can go and look through jobs from there. Because I think that's initially where I found half of the jobs that I ended up applying to recently.
And I don't know their names or I would drop them. There are some really nice people on LinkedIn who collect the jobs for you. And I follow like 3 or 4 people now for science communication jobs. I know Amy Ains is one of them, and I think Justin Doherty. But they'll post, here's the weekly roundup, and they'll say 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10, like they break it down and none of those links are on, in my experience, on the LinkedIn job board. And a lot of, I think, research shows the job board is like 80% fake or full or not that helpful. So I totally agree with Mackenzie. If you can find actual humans posting about a job, I think you're much better off and hopefully not going to get as frustrated.
Wow, that was a lot of great stuff going on there. I'm hearing a big theme of be the portfolio you want to see in the world. So like we have a question about being able to, what tools do we want to develop? I think it would be fair to say you want to start the tools that you want to use later on as soon as we can. And even if it's not directly applicable to something that we think is going on, I think finding those creative solutions of using wedding photography for a way to understand visual communication sounds really great. I love that indirect application into stuff. We're just making our own blog to make it happen. While at the same time, then leveraging the networking stuff, whether it be online or with different fellowships, to make that happen and carve a path with what's going on. There's a theme of transitioning from a science research position or learning about science to then this different stage of teaching about science, whether it be to other folks in an industry setting or to the public. Matt, you talked about having to teach the goldfish in your industry. Could you teach or talk about how that transition from lab space to this job that you have now? What are some of the differences? What are some of the hurdles you maybe found, or what are some of the exciting things that happened along the way?
I think what I'd really like to emphasize is that no matter if you're at a like a lab where everyone has their own project, but you're all working under API, or you are at a startup that has 5 people, or you're at a multinational that employs 80,000 people. And not to sound too reductive, but you're all groups of people working together for a shared goal. Whether you're part of a lab and you're doing research or microscopy on one thing, and then another person, like with aphids, another person's working with bees. To use my graduate lab as an example, or if you're the R&D team and the commercialization team at a corporation, right? I just think that maybe soft skills are also really important. You need to be able to know what you're talking about. You need to be able to have the requisite education to be able to succeed in a graduate lab or to be able to teach undergrads a course, but also being able to work as a team, able to present out to other people, able to lead a team and execute on a goal, able to offer mentorship to other people to grow them as contributors as well, is something that I have found to be essential when transitioning from, for example, from the lab into a corporate environment. And it only becomes more and more important as companies start to adopt more tools or make teams leaner. I think being able to coordinate well with other people, give and take feedback constructively is something that sets people apart in an environment like this.
It sounds like there's a lot of these communication and teamwork and skills that are definitely part of this field that you're in right now. That if they're not necessarily part of the lab that one is working in right now, integrating those into a lab would also be really helpful, and having that teamwork, communication, and making that go and be really great. So there's some stuff that we have of when we're talking about stuff. It's kind of maybe adjacent to our questions about the audience, but there's also this idea of we're individuals, and a theme that we've had in past panels is specificity is really helpful in terms of marketing yourself or having yourself stand out in your career path. So for folks in the panel, how have you found your voice? Do you have a unique perspective or a tone that you want to convey in your communication? I can leave that up for, let's say, Mainika. Would you be able to start that?
I was gonna say I can kick that off because I have operated in a lot of different voices and tones across like writing for pretty casual news outlets to producing audio for adults and then also kids. And I think the most helpful thing for finding a tone and finding a voice is probably, besides practicing, because I already talked a lot about that, is probably reading other people's work or listening to other people's work and identifying, even if you don't want to copy the specific things that you're hearing from what they're doing, but identifying things that are strong about what they're doing and unique. So, like, I would think about the Science Versus podcast that Spotify produces. The first host, I'm forgetting her last name, but her first name is Wendy. And like, I remember listening to her when I was in graduate school and just hearing how much of herself and how much humor and how much basically just energy she brought to hosting that show and being like, oh, that's really like, that's something that really sort of just like catches my ear, is something that I think makes her podcast really strong. And so I think just consuming a lot of different work is helpful to find basically what you like and what you don't like, and like what you feel jealous of, what you might want to work on. Um, yeah. So I think that's what I would say. And then, but I would also say that voice and tone shift so much, and it's so possible to basically like turn the volume up on different parts of things that are part of you basically. For kids, like I get to turn the volume way up on silly. um, and that's really fun. But for writing for a DOE audience, I I get to turn the volume up on sort of like clarity and impact in a way that's also interesting. So yeah, I think those things can change, and it's mostly practice, but consuming a lot of work helps.
I have almost like an opposite experience, but I really liked hearing yours and then thinking on my own. So I feel like when I started, so life cycle assessment is really technical as a ton of sciences. And so I feel like I started with my scientist hat, and then now I have totally shifted into my like creative artist hat. And I found that Well, not all scientists like it at first. Most of them come around and really appreciate it. And so I find like the more I am myself and kind of force that narrative on my scientists, I find it's really effective. And so I'm actually giving a talk next week too. I go to these conferences and I'm in a different position, I think, where I'm one of the only people in this field who really like focus on the communication aspect because it's not just STEM communication, it's like niche LCA communication. But people find it really valuable. And so that's something I've kind of leaned into, like becoming confident, like, no, I'm right. Pretty is important, and people like looking at pretty things. And I think for a while I felt like, oh no, that's like kind of girly. That's not scientist like. Don't say things like that. And now I've completely shifted to like really owning my own brand and like, yes, my graphs sparkle. They're pastel, they're accessible, but they're like I do use pink and things like that. Um, so I think these are two really good perspectives. Like, Manica, you have to wear different hats, and so that might be the role some of you end up in. But then I also think creating like your personal brand. So then I post on LinkedIn and I use the sparkle emoji like every time that I post on LinkedIn. And so I don't know. I think that I'm lucky now to be more like in a role, so I feel confident. But as you're developing, I think both are important. Be able to wear different hats, but I know kind of creating your own brand, especially on LinkedIn, a lot of people respect that too. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
I would say for me, the different types of audiences I write for are sort of opposite in a way. So here I have like more of the technical, biosafety, boring things that no one wants to think about or talk about in the lab. So I'm really working hard because we're basically starting from scratch. We don't have biosafety officers or anything here on our campus because the state can't afford them. And so I'm basically like starting from scratch and making trainings that aren't old YouTube links from the 90s, trying my hardest to make things more engaging so that people can remember, like, oh, maybe I should remember to turn the biosafety cabinet on before I open my virus stock, you know, things like that. Um, versus for my blog, it's like one of my examples that's my favorite one I've written so far is on immunology. Obviously, it's like probably the most complicated biology topic there is, immunology. And so with that, I get to be a little more silly, and be able to translate those complex topics down a little more so that everyone can understand it. I believe the average American right now reads at a seventh grade level. So you have to consider that when you're writing for a sort of general audience. And so with that immunology blog post I made, I like to use analogies a lot. And so for the two different immune systems. You have the my brain just stopped working. Wow. The adaptive and the innate immune system. I had the analogy of like a sword and a shield and how the innate immune system is that shield which does its best to protect you, but then sometimes the adaptive will have to bring the sword out and kill the pathogens. And that was sort of the analogy I went with. And then I made a funny video to go along with it where some of my coworkers volunteered to like be knights attacking some pathogens. So that's sort of the polar opposite audiences that I've had to write for. And I have to think a lot about who am I writing for and what do they care about? What do they want to hear the most and what the priorities are in terms of engaging with them and helping them understand what they're reading.
I would say I would love to see some nights in my biosafety presentations myself. But I see this to like put this all together, there's this idea of like consuming as much as we can about the types of communication that's out there to understand what works for you and what works for the audience that you're trying to look at, but then also yeah, adopting the things that work for you, speak to your own desire of what you want to communicate. And then also just introducing some of your own stuff because you're going to be doing your own special thing and maybe you like a sparkle. I know I like a joke every now and then in my presentations. And having that in there and maybe giving a little bit of you want to know the field and how to communicate, but also you can change it too in your own ways that are unique to you, whether it be a sparkle or a laugh. We do have a specific question from an audience member about how to find an audience or identify an audience if you're just doing freelance science communication. So it sounds like Mackenzie, you had this in your experience of when you set out to do your blog. Did you have an audience in mind when you started that, or did you just kind of throw something out there and see who came?
So I would say my target audience was like my great aunt and my grandma. So I'm sure we all can relate to someone's great aunt sharing some misinformation on Facebook, and that's sort of where the idea came from. I had always wanted to do science communication, and during COVID, my family constantly was messaging me like, "What does this mean?" So I was basically already translating science for them in 2020 and 2021 as like the vaccines came out and everything. So with that, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do this blog and hopefully my grandma reads it at the very least. Maybe some other people will too. I've gotten like 500 views so far, I think. But it's pretty cool how you can grow something from nothing. And so with that in mind, I'm making it pretty easy to be understandable to any audience. That way, anyone could read it if they wanted, but my target audience was very much like my community, as that's being shared on my Facebook primarily for my family members who have zero understanding of science. But I feel like it's really important that they understand it at least a little bit.
Manica, from your perspective, with the official position of having to reach folks in a public audience, do you know how you found your audience? Is there that forward of trying to target a specific person, or do you often sometimes put stuff out and then see who listens to it and build from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think both basically. Um, but I would say basically every place I've worked, we're using lots of tools from newsletters to social media to even just conferences, and sort of word of mouth communication to say, hey, this is out here, maybe you could share it. We are also basically like one metric of success for us is something we made shared by people beyond our immediate institution or our immediate collaborators, because that means it's really interesting. And so that's what we're always aiming for. And we do see that sometimes on LinkedIn or in basically X or Blue Sky posts. So that sort of ties back to like a snowball effect of how people are sharing things. And yeah, but I would say I don't know, that's not so connected to sort of like finding an audience, since our audience is like installed a little bit in terms of just our goals. The one thing I would say about finding an audience as someone starting out, is it's worth just reaching out to people who are doing work that you think is good or that you like. You won't hear back from everyone, but you'll hear back from some people. And if you can like get coffee with them, or if they're local, or chat briefly, there's things you can learn and they might follow your work after that. So I think just getting in touch with people is useful in terms of drumming up your own audience too.
Yeah, I think in a era of social media, reach cold emailing folks or cold dropping in the DMs and saying, "Hey, I like your work," and then getting your face out there and potentially even getting stuff shared by that way would be a really helpful thing to be doing. So bring it all together. We have this whole idea of getting an understanding of what type of things we want to do in our communication by consuming this information and learning what our own things we want to integrate into that is starting sooner than later. It seems like a big theme, and making sure that you develop your own portfolio of whatever you want to be doing and making sure you have the correct file names, it seems. Um, and then just learning your audience, having those teaching skills and being able to understand the communication that's going on there. We have kind of a forward perspective look here. I like to have in maybe a final question of in your career or in your field, or maybe just in your personal life at the moment, what's something you're excited about in terms of maybe it's related to science communication? Is there something coming up, a conference, or is there something that you're looking forward to? I'll leave that whoever is most
Yes, I
excited
can
about
go
something.
first. I'm super excited about my new job that starts next month. Um, I finally have a job in the field of interest that I've been wanting to do that will pay me versus, freelance or, volunteer type of work. So I'm really excited to use the knowledge that I've gained and all of these skills I have taught myself to bring more engagement into science and into the fields that obviously aren't getting enough funding/attention. And so I think it's important. Our jobs as science communicators might be the most important communication roles, just because of how important science is and being able to explain that to people.
I'm excited basically about getting back to audio this year. I had a baby a year ago, and so I was like on leave and I was working part time. And I love bringing sort of individual researchers' interest and humor and just personality about their work in through an audio story. It's just nice to like hear and give people a platform for that. And so, yeah, I'm excited about getting more work out there that's more personal to people. Yeah, now that I'm like fully back at work.
I've been recently excited. Obviously, I'm in the field of sustainability, which isn't doing so great with some legislation, but actually, there's some statewide, like, I'm sorry, state-specific legislations recently. California is one of them. There's some in Europe as well that continue to really push for carbon emission reporting and so things like that. I'm seeing maybe a bit of a shift in those wins and just tapping into new markets like that and continuing, to get more business that way. And then I can communicate to them and share more. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster lately. I'm really excited about that.
I'll share two things. One is a general trend, and the other is specific to the work that I do. The first one I'd like to share is that I think the data is starting to trend towards a lot of like keyword stuffed or AI slop content is starting to be rejected by people who are viewing it, which is exciting that people are really emphasizing clear and concise storytelling or writing. And they need to be, frankly, written by a human or written by a human who is really commandeering AI for a constructive use. So it's nice to see that people are rediscovering communication in the on the internet. The second one, I've been taking a leadership position in a, let's say, science communication effort that will be debuting at the American Association for Cancer Research on April 18, so the AACR conference. So keep an eye out for what's coming next from 10x Genomics, because I've had a lot of work.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. That'll be our panel for the time being. Thanks so much to our panelists for joining us today and dedicating their time for this hour and this great conversation. We really appreciate them doing this. Thanks for everyone who came. We hope to see you again soon. We have a couple slides here that we can share. There's a couple things. We have our next panel coming up, or actually it's going to be more of a workshop-based program on April 24th. It's going to be about CV building and making sure that those documents that we're producing and we're going to be using to communicate are going to be great and going to be helping us the best ways we can. We have this QR code available if you'd like to check that out. As well as we're looking for new folks to join our working group committee. If you want to be part of this networking opportunity and assembling these panels and helping other folks find ways to learn about how to do these early career stuff, then you can scan this code here and we'll be happy to have you join us. And so with that, thank you so much, everyone. We hope you take care. Have a good spring break. Enjoy this warm and weather.